she was a nuclear bomber carrier, and she was doing the quick reaction alert that required. She was painted white, anti-nuclear flash, and then when she stopped doing that and became a low-level conventional bomber, they changed the colour to this current camouflage scheme. And of course, right at the end of her operational career, in April 1982, supported by 11 Victors and another Vulcan, Vulcan 607 hit the centre line of Port Stanley runway, and there are the aviators departing from the formation with the Vulcan. Vulcan will now come back after that lovely little show, very unexpected from the aviators. We'll be seeing them come back after Vulcan has finished. We will now see Vulcan's normal display. So as I was saying, Vulcan 607 flew from Ascension Island in 1982 and hit the centre line of Port Stanley runway in the Falklands. It was the first proper big raid on the Argentines' occupation of the Falklands. They dropped 21 1,000-pound bombs. That's what this bomb bay can carry. They hit the runway with 2, which was about par for the course, because these were virtually Second World War bombs. There were no smart bombs in those days, no guidance of any kind. So in order to be sure of hitting something, you had to drop a lot. So 21 1,000-pound bombs. The extraordinary thing is that this was the longest bombing raid in history at the time. 7,760 miles round trip, which is about as far as from here to Santiago in Chile. And to get there, it took them 18 air-to-air refuelings. 18. Just think of that. And as they were getting back, they very nearly missed their last slot. So they were never sure whether they were going to get home at the end of this extraordinary raid. So here she comes from the right, in the hands of Captain Kev Rumans, Co-Captain Bill Perrins, AEO Phil Davis. Your very own Vulcan. See, everybody thinks she's very noisy, but she can tiptoe up on you. The man who flew the amazing raid on the Falkland Islands, Martin Withers, is now the chief pilot of the Vulcan to the Sky Trust. He's not flying today. He was awarded a DFC for that. And that aircraft that he took down to the Falkland Islands is now on static display at Waddington, where she was based. So the first Vulcan flew in 1952, so last year she was celebrating her Diamond Jubilee along with Her Majesty. In fact, every air show last year was in celebration of Her Majesty's Diamond Jubilee, and by kind permission of Buckingham Palace. This aircraft was made in 1960, so she had her 53rd birthday last Saturday. At the Farnborough Airshow, and I can remember seeing this, one of her test pilots rolled this aeroplane. It didn't go down very well, and he was told not to do it again in public, but it was quite capable of being rolled. And she has a fighter-like control stick. Doesn't have a big yoke like most bombers would have. So she really is a bomber pretending to be a fighter. Now you see that bomb bay opening there, the bomb bay doors open, and that is where she carried those 10 tons, 21,000 pounds of bombs.
Cheers. Ollie. Helicopter off.
Quarter to three?
Yeah.
Is that, are they just on work?
Yeah.
So quarter to three?
Yeah.
That's lovely, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Left, and here is the Sea Fury. Now there's a wonderful sound. The 18 cylinders of the Bristol Centaurus 18. 2 rows of 9. Radial engine, 2,500 horsepower produced by that enormous engine. Big 5-bladed propeller, nearly 13 feet in diameter. He was doing 380 miles an hour as he came past that first time. Radial engine is where the cylinders are circularly positioned around a central crankshaft, and this thing has 2 rows of 9. You need odd numbers for a radial engine, so 2 rows of 9 make up this huge, as I said, 2,500 horsepower engine. It looks a bit like a German Focke-Wulf aircraft. That's because the idea originated when they captured a 190 in 1942. This was supposed to be a lightweight but very powerful radial engine fighter, designed by Sidney Cam of Hurricane fame. I expect to see Goji go out half right from us. Watch for a Derry turn. He wants to turn right, but he starts rolling left, right through the upside down position and ends up turning right. That's the Derry turn, named after John Derry, the great de Havilland test pilot who was killed in a sad accident. And as Goatee brings the splendid Sea Fury back in, expect to see one of those barrel rolls along the main axis.
No.
So this wonderful Sydney cam design, there's the barrel roll starting, became the fastest single-engine propeller-driven aircraft ever produced. And actually an American-owned civilian Fury held the world piston engine speed record for a while. It was eventually overtaken by the Bearcat. 1943, they wanted a naval version of this. Right, extra 300 of blades. Now, I'm not sure exactly who's in which. There's the elegant shape of the extra 300, and I expect them to be more Andy Offer, Miles Garland and Andy Evans. But we shall hear more about that later from their commentator Natasha Glenville when they come to do their display at the end of the day. All ex-Red Arrows pilots. Very nice to see them here today. Highly professional bunch.
Careful.
Interestingly, they call themselves the world's only globally accredited aerobatic airline. They're allowed to fly passengers at a price
Joshua.
to go do little bits of aerobatics, sometimes in formation. They also fly in formation with the Vulcan, which we shall of course be seeing later. But today we're going to have a different formation with the Vulcan. Interesting to compare the manoeuvres of an aircraft like this. Watch out for the sun, by the way, if you're looking through binoculars. If you catch the sun in your bins, you're probably going to burn a hole in the back of your head, so probably don't do that. Half Cuban. Now, I think Cliff Spink is going to do the other half of the half Cuban, so the aircraft will actually have described a complete figure eight in the sky. But anyway, look how big the manoeuvres are, big wide manoeuvres. Remember what the Typhoon looked like earlier? Everything was done very tight. That's the difference in modern aircraft and this type of aircraft. There's another Derry turn as Cliff takes it out to the right.
Joshua.
Almost certainly the most famous combat aircraft of its day. Came into service at a time when the P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts were the main combat fighters, big piston engine aircraft. It was originally a straight wing aircraft, but as we can see, it turned into a swept wing. Cliff coming in for a barrel roll now. The prototype achieved more than 600 miles an hour with a small 3,750 pounds of thrust engine. This engine is a GE turbojet, nearly 6,000 pounds of static thrust. Marshal's going to do us a 4-point roll now. So we'll see him. You can see all that smoke. There's the first 90 degrees, second, third, fourth. 4-point hesitation roll. But actually, if you think that smoke looks bad, you really ought to have seen the B-47 Stratojet bomber, which had 6 of these GE engines. But by contrast, interestingly, the Saber's big adversary in the Korean War, the MiG-15, didn't have it didn't have an American engine. It had a very close copy of the Rolls-Royce Nîmes, which our clever government had let the Russians have, and that didn't make any smoke at all. So the US pilots in Korea would say, if it smokes, it's friendly. Hundreds of Sabres were ordered, went on to achieve much success in the war. Their E and F models got marked superiority over the Russian MiG-15s. Here is Cliff coming in towards us with all that plume of smoke. It's almost as good as having a smoke generator. Sort of a bleak 360 turn, a kind of loop canted on its side. Interesting man, Cliff Spink. The slightly harsher sound of the bigger Griffon. And now comes the Merlin.
Taking that up.
No more fighters.
Now you might have noticed there that the Spitfire has broken away from the formation. But we're going to see a 2-ship formation with the Lancaster in front and the Hurricane in line astern, coming in from the right. And meanwhile, the Spitfire will be positioning to start his display from straight ahead over on the far side of the airfield. Off to our right over the treetops there. Wonderful sight.
No.
5 more off the wingtips there, and here come the other 2. And here she is, the Spitfire Mark 19 in the hands of Party Pilots. And the aircraft this represents was Spitfire that did the last array of operational Spitfire flights on the 1st of April 1954. You may have seen when this aircraft came into land, it has the last painted on the nose. That last mission was a photographic sortie over the jungle in Johor looking for communist guerrilla hideouts. And the man flying this training as a Royal Air Force officer in Texas. He then flew the F-4 Phantom at Lucas and Wildenrath, then the F-3 Tornado at Leeming, and then the F-16 on exchange with the Royal Netherlands Air Force at Leeuwarden. After flying with the Cloggies, he became an instructor on the Tornado 3, the Interceptor Tornado Operational Conversion Unit, and was their display pilot. And then he did 4 years on the Red Arrows, and then went on to the Typhoon Operational Conversion Unit at Coningsby. And he's now the full-time Adjutant and Operations Officer of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. He's one of only 2 full-time flyers on the flight, the other is the boss. So I think that is a pretty charmed life. Well, I rather think that rolling departure from the Spitfire means that the Hurricane will shortly be with us. But maybe Archie's going to do one more fly through. It's lovely how the sun keeps glinting off those wings. Yes, Spitfire from the left, Hurricane from the right. How dramatic is that? Beautifully done, guys. Hurricane, when you compare it to the graceful shape, particularly of the Mark 19 Spitfire, looking ever so slightly humpy, and yet an absolutely wonderful aeroplane. This is a Hurricane 2C LF363, one of the original airplanes on the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. As it comes towards us, you see those fairly planky, thick wings. Not the same shape as the Spitfire wings, but nonetheless immensely successful. It made its reputation in the Battle of Britain. Significantly less of a performer than its main fighter opponent, the Messerschmitt 109. It did turn out to be a very good bomber. The very first roll by a helicopter that you may have seen this year. And there you go. That was intentional. It looks as though it's falling out of the sky. In fact, it looks very, very uncomfortable indeed. But that is what helicopters do when you do unusual things to them. Because, of course, they're not really designed to do that, as they're not designed to go upside down right now. Coming into what is effectively a helicopter half Cuban there, you see that the tail does its best to break away from normal flight. And correcting that is a feat of quite interesting ergonomics in the cockpit. The Lynx helicopter has, of course, been the mainstay of operations of the Army Air Corps for the last 30 years and is still used today in its variants as a Mark 9 in Afghanistan. And Eddie and Alex there just throwing in another loop to reposition out on what we call the B-axis, flying away from you. 671 Squadron at Middle Wallop is to the Mark 7 before going on to their squadron duties, whilst Alex is the recruiting officer until quite recently taking up a new job. Now, here's the time to keep an eye on this helicopter, because right now the signature movement for the Army Air Corps and the past history of the Blue Eagles. Stand by with your cameras to be amazed, boys and girls, the backflip. Yes, it's all very well going into a loop when you actually have some forward speed on, but trying to do it when you go from a standing start is actually, I can assure you, very uncomfortable indeed. Yes, we're joined today by Mr. Prince from the Royal International Air 2, and pleasure to see him joining us here today. Good afternoon, sir. Jolly smart. Okay, we're back to the flying again. Here we are now with Eddie and Alex repositioning. What Eddie is doing all the flying, and Alex in the other seat is actually monitoring all the temperatures and pressures and power settings to ensure that during
into a 90-90 now. Again, a zoom climb up, all the power being used with the cycling right back to get into that position and then pushing the nose right over. Not a terribly comfortable manoeuvre at all. But of course, huge amount of experience in there. Captain Brown is currently the second in command of 671 Squadron, several thousand hours behind him, and indeed also many students have passed through his hands. He led the team when we had a full Blue Eagles in 2008, and has used all that experience to put back into the Lynx display this year a number of manoeuvres that sadly we haven't seen a great deal of. Coming back into a rearwards transition now, both of the crew will be working hard to ensure that the helicopter stays straight all the way down the display line whilst pirouetting around their own fuselage. Luckily today conditions of course very benign and absolutely perfect for display flying. Captain Cramphorn in the other seat, as I say, for the last year was our recruiting officer. We do have all the recruiting team here on the ground between the hangars, so if you're interested in Army flying, do of course please come and talk to them. And you will see another of our aircraft in about an hour's time, of course the indomitable Apache attack helicopter. Right now though, the Mark 7 is probably in its last year or so of service. It will soon be replaced by the Wildcat. And that training is currently undergoing evaluation work at Royal Naval Air Station down at Yeovilton, where eventually all the Lynx/Wildcat pilots will be based. And that will start with great vengeance, actually start at the beginning of next year. So it could well be that this aerobatic display that you see from the Mark 7 could well go through its last year of displaying next year. And that is going to be a huge loss to the basically the ethos and image of Army Aviation, which for many years, as you know, has been demonstrating an aerobatic format in its, all of its helicopter displays. Now, as well as training individuals to convert to the Lynx helicopter, 671 Squadron has other roles with the Bell 212 and also the Gazelle helicopter, which remains in service for a little bit longer, doing essential internal security work in Northern Ireland. The Bell 212 has recently redeployed from that squadron to Kenya, but we retain a...
Please welcome the 2013 Chinook display team. Seesaw, a manoeuvre made up of two opposed pedal turns, similar to stall turns in the fixed-wing world. It is well known that the Chinook makes an incredible sound while in flight, and this will be ably demonstrated to you while the aircraft carries out its next manoeuvre, the Gorney Climb.
It's the loudest helicopter in the world. Run away! It's going to kill us!
Named after the base in Bosnia, where the Chinook demonstrated its excess of power compared to other helicopters in theatre. It is followed by a 720 corkscrew descent from around 1,000 feet. The crewmen will be regretting that extra sandwich about now. displays. Please show your appreciation to our crew today by giving them a big wave as they pass along the crowd line. As the aircraft passes, you will notice its 3 hooks used for carrying on the slung loads. These can hold up to 10.5 metric tons. This great ability to carry 3 external loads simultaneously while still carrying a large internal load has made the Chinook famous the world over and recently the workhorse of the Afghan theatre. The aircraft today weighs 15 tons, but as you can see it's still highly manoeuvrable, making it an ideal battlefield helicopter and especially suited to the medical evacuation role. These evacuations involve fast, high-paced manoeuvres to quickly extract the casualty from the battlefield, often under enemy fire.
With the Apache attack helicopter in close support. I have with me Squadron Leader Fiona McGlynn, who's an experienced nursing officer, staff officer in charge of MERTs. How is it when you're going out in that helicopter in the hot conditions?
Obviously there's an adrenaline rush, but you're preparing the kit that you're going to need based on the information that you've been given in that MISTAT. We know this patient has a gunshot wound to his chest, so will he have lost a lot of blood? So we need to be preparing the blood. And will he need to be put to sleep for the journey back to the hospital?
Okay, well now the helicopter has touched down, but the man who's been seriously injured, his life has just gone to pause. And this is how that affected Marine Mark Ormerod.
The last thing I remember is as the Chinook landed, it obviously creates quite a sandstorm. I remember that, and stones and dust flying everywhere, and the heat from the exhaust beating down, and that was it. Then I passed out. The incident happened on Christmas Eve 2007, and the next time I woke up was the 28th of December. I was in Sellout Hospital in Birmingham, back in the UK, just down the road.
So the MERT aircraft has landed on, the Apache's staying up high to protect them in the overwatch position, protecting both the MERT aircraft and the crew. The paramedics and the force protection team, they're from the RAF regiment, they all run down the ramp of the Chinook, and the protection team take up their positions around the emergency landing site. The enemy aren't done yet. They attack the Chinook, and the force protection team do their best to keep them at bay. And the Apache is always high above, ready to launch Hellfire missiles on the attackers if necessary. The Force Protection Commander searches the wounded man, and in the military phrase, he sanitizes him before he's airlifted out. His weapon is unloaded. And there, they've carried him on, and the aircraft is already airborne after only 90 seconds. Now the work really starts, Fiona McGlynn.
Yes, it does. Most of our flights are only 6 to 7 minutes in duration, so we have to make sure that that casualty gets back to the Roll 3 Bastion as quickly and safely as he can, and in the best possible conditions. So when he returns to the UK to his loved ones, he's got the best possible chance of survival.
Well, it must be very difficult because it's noisy and it's hot, and I mean it's just impossible medical conditions.
It is difficult for the doctors certainly to be putting patients to sleep on the floor of helicopters, but we manage, and the communication thing, as you say, can be difficult, but we have radios, so we're able to communicate with each other, and the nurse is on communications with the aircrew to make sure we're getting the most appropriate information back to the Roll 3 to make sure the best team is ready for this patient when he arrives.
And mostly it works?
It does, thankfully, yes, absolutely.
Well, Mark Ormerod, that we were hearing from, who knows all about how this kind of thing does work, has something that he wants to say.
I would just like to say a personal thank you to all the MERT teams.
So off to the right then, the Hercules C-130 of 24 Squadron. You'll see the ramp is down at the back. It's flown today for us by Flight Lieutenant Stu Wright. Co-pilot is Flight Lieutenant Dave Hogg. and the air loadmaster is Sergeant Andy Prawl, and I think you will probably see him in the back of the aircraft, somewhere near that ramp at the back. And this rounds off our MERT demonstration. This is another of these aircraft that are capable of carrying and looking after and treating casualties. Of how easy to handle the Vulcan is. So you can go this slowly to keep position with these two little aircraft. In fact, they're making more noise than she is. That's Kev Rumans flying. Co-captain is Bill Perrins. Third member of the crew is the Air Electronics Officer, Phil Davies. Now they'll do a little teardrop pattern, which is a sort of horizontal wing over, if you like, to bring them back in front of us. Just here, Vulcan's Olympus engines coming on there. I think we'll hear them rather more loudly later in her display. But it's interesting, I think, to observe that the RV-8s were making more noise than the big Vulcan with its Rolls-Royce Bristol Olympus 202 engines, 16,400 pounds of static thrust from each of them. So that's getting on for 70,000 pounds of static thrust in total. She's not using, well, she's only using a tiny proportion of that as we speak. I was saying about Roy Chadwick, the Lancaster designer. He drew this picture in 1946, that's only 5 years after the Lancaster first flew, of the aeroplane that recognisably is this aeroplane today. And even more interestingly, if you stretch it by 3/4 along its length, you get recognisably Concorde, because Vulcan is a predecessor, an antecedent of Concorde. Concorde also had Rolls-Royce Bristol Olympus engines, although rather different ones. There by the two RV-8 guys, Alistair Kay and Andy Hill. You just get a little suspicion of Vulcan's engines slightly opening up there. She looks enormous. She's actually not that big. She's about the same size as a small Airbus airliner, an A318, almost exactly, with the dimensions swapped over.